Thus spake Zarathustra, Une Zarathustra, by Friedrich Nietzsche, translated by Thomas Common. The Modern Library New. The Modern Library is published by Random House, Inc. Manufactured in the United States of America by H. Wolfe. Contents. Age. Introduction. By Mrs. Forster Nietzsche. Roman 9. Thus spake Zarathustra. Zarathustra. S. Prologue 3. First part. Chapter 1. The Three Metamorphoses 23-2. The Academic Chairs of Virtue 25. 3. Backworldsman 28. 4. The Despisers of the Body 32. 5. Joys and Passions 34. 6. The Pale Criminal 36. 7. Reading and Writing 39. 8. The Tree on the Hill 41. 9. The Preachers of Death 44:10. War and Warriors 47:11. The New Idol 49. 12. The Flies in the Marketplace 52. 13. Chastity 56:14. The Friend 57:15. The 1001 Goal 60. 1:6. Neighbor Love 63:17. The Way of the Creating 1:6 seconds. 1:8. Old and Young Women 68. 19. The Bite of the Adder 70. 20. Child and Marriage 72. 21. Voluntary Death 75:22. The Bestowing Virtue 78. V. Romans 6 Contents. Second part. I Had Her 23. The Child with the Mirror 87. 24. In the Happy Isles 90:25. The Pitiful 3:26. The Priests 96:27. The Virtuous 99:28. The Rabble 103:29. The Tarantulas 106:30. The Famous Wise Ones No 31. The Night Song 113:32. The Dance Song 116:33. The Grave Song 118:34. Self-Surpassing 122:35. The Sublime Ones 126:36. The Land of Culture 129:37. Immaculate Perception 132:38. Scholars 135:39. Poets 38:40. Great Events 142:41. The Soothsayer 146:42. Redemption 150:43. Manly Prudence 156:44. The Stillest Hour 159. Third part 45. The Wanderer 167:46. The Vision and the Enigma 171:47. Involuntary Bliss 177:48. Before Sunrise 181:49. The Bedwarring Virtue 184:50. On the Olive Mount 181. Contents VLL. Hata Peace 51. On Passing by 194:52. The Apostates 188:53. The Return Home 203. 54. The Three Evil Things 207. 55. The Spirit of Gravity 213:56. Old and New Tables 218. 57. The Convalescent 241. 58. The Great Longing 248:59. The Second Dance Song 252:60. The Seven Seals 256. Fourth and last part 61. The Honey Sacrifice 263. 62. The Cry of Distress 267. 63. Talk with the Kings 271:64. The Leech 276. 65. The Magician 280. 66. Out of Service 288. 67. The Ugliest Man 283. 68. The Voluntary Beggar 288:69. The Shadow 303. 70. Noontide 307. 71. The Greeting 311:72. The Supper 317:73. The Higher Man 319:74. The Song of Melancholy 332. 75. Science 338. 76. Among Daughters of the Desert 341:77. The Awakening 348:78. The Ass Festival 352. 79. The Drunken Song 356:80. The Sign 365. Introduction by Mrs. Forster and L. H. How Zarathustra Came Into. Zarathustra is my brother S. most personal work. It is the history of his most individual experiences, of his friendships, ideals, raptures, bitters, disappointments, and sorrows. Above it all, however, there soars, transfiguring it, the image of his greatest hopes and remotest aims. My brother had the figure of Zarathustra in his mind from his very earliest youth. He once told me that even as a child he had dreamt of him. At different periods in his life he would call this wonder of his dreams by different names, but in the end, he declares in a note on the subject, I had to do a Persian the honor of identifying him with this creature of my fancy. Persians were the first to take a broad and comprehensive view of history. Every series of evolutions, according to them, was presided over by a prophet, and every prophet had his Hazar, his dynasty of 1,000 years, and quot. All Zarathustra's views, as also his personality, were early conceptions of my brother's mind. Whoever reads his posthumously published writings for the years 1869-82 with care, will constantly meet with passages suggestive of Zarathustra's thoughts and doctrines. For instance, the ideal of the Superman is put forth quite clearly in all his writings during the years 1870-375. And we philologists, the following remarkable observations occur. How can one praise and glorify a nation as a whole? Roman 9, X. Introduction. Even among the Greeks, it was the individuals that counted. The Greeks are interesting and extremely important because they reared such a vast number of great individuals. How is this possible? The question is one which ought to be studied. I am interested only in the relations of the people to the rearing of the individual man, and among the Greeks the conditions were unusually favorable for the development of each individual, not by any means owing to the goodness of the people, but because of the struggles of their evil instincts. With the help of favorable measures, great individuals might be reared who would be both different from and higher than those who heretofore have owed their existence to mere chance. Here we may still be hopeful, in the rearing of exceptional men. The notion of rearing the Superman is only a new form of an ideal Nietzsche already had in his youth, that the object of mankind should lie in its highest individuals, or, as he writes in Schopenhauer as educator, mankind ought constantly to be striving to produce great men, this and nothing else is its duty, and quot. But the ideals he most revered in those days are no longer held to be the highest types of men. No, around this future ideal of a coming humanity, the Superman, the poets spread the veil of becoming. Who can tell to what glorious heights man can still ascend? That is why, after having tested the worth of our noblest ideal, that of the Savior, in the light of the new valuations, the poet cries with passionate emphasis in Zarathustra, "Never yet hath there been a Superman. Naked have I seen both of them, the greatest and the smallest man. All too similar are they still to each other. Verily even the greatest found I all too human." H.N. Introduction, Roman 11. The phrase "the rearing of the Superman" has very often been misunderstood. By the word rearing, in this case, is meant the act of modifying by means of new and higher values. Values which, as laws and guides of conduct and opinion, are now to rule over mankind. In general, the doctrine of the Superman can only be understood correctly in conjunction with other ideas of the author S, such as the order of rank, the will to power, and the transvaluation of all values. He assumes the T. Christianity is a product of the resentment of the botched and the weak, has put in ban all that is beautiful / strong. Proof 3 and powerful 1*1 MLAC have the qualities resulting from strength, and that, in consequence, all forces which tend promote or elevate ITT have been seriously undermined are BI LI1 11T 11J FEIR tilde. However, a new table of valuations must be placed of tilde J mankind, namely, that of the strong, mighty, and magnificent man, overflowing with life, and elevated to his zenith, the Superman who is now put before us with overpowering passion as the aim of our life, hope, and will. And just as the oldie system of valuing, which only extolled the qualities favorable to the weak, the suffering, and the oppressed, has succeeded in producing a weak, suffering, and modern race, so this new and reverse system of valuing ought to rear a healthy, strong, lively, and courageous type, which would be a glory to life itself. Stated briefly, the lead principle of this new system of valuing would be, all that proceeds from power is good, all that springs from weakness is bad. This type must not be regarded as a fanciful figure. It is not a nebulous hope which is to be realized at some indefinitely remote period, thousands of years hence, nor is it a new species in the Darwinian sense of which we can know nothing, and which it would therefore be somewhat absurd to strive after. But it is meant to be a possibility which men of the present XLL Introduction could realize with all their spiritual and physical energies, provided they adopted the new values. The author of Zarathustra never lost sight of that agar. Just example of a transvaluation of all values through Christianity, whereby the whole of the deified mode of life and thought of the Greeks, as well as strong Romedom, was almost annihilated or transvalued in a comparatively short time. Could not our rejuvenated Grasko-Roman system of valuing, once it had been refined and made more profound by the schooling which 2,000 years of Christianity had provided, effect another such revolution within a calculable period of time, until that glorious type of manhood shall finally appear which is to be our new faith and hope, and in the creation of which Zarathustra exhorts us to participate? In his private notes on subject the author uses the expression Superman, always in the singular, by the by, as signifying the most thoroughly well-constituted type, as opposed to modern man. Above all, however, he designates Zarathustra himself as an example of the Superman. In Ex Homo he is careful to enlighten us concerning the precursors and prerequisites to the advent of this highest type in referring to a certain passage in the Joyful Wisdom. In order to understand this type, we must first be quite clear in regard to the leading physiological condition on which it depends. This condition is what I call great healthiness. I know not how to express my meaning more plainly or more personally than I have done already in one of the last chapters, aphorism 382 of the 5th book of the Joyful Wisdom, in quote. We the new, the nameless, the Hartum Durst, and it says there we firstlings of the yet untried future /v require for a new and also a new means, namely, a new healthiness, stronger, sharper, tougher, bolder, and merrier than all healthiness hitherto. Heu sol lung of T**. Introduction XLT. Experience the whole range of hitherto recognized values and desirabilities, and to circumnavigate all the coasts of this ideal Mediterranean Sea, who, from the adventures of his most personal experience, wants to know how it feels to be a conqueror and discoverer of the ideal, as likewise how it is with the artist, the saint, the legislator, the sage, the scholar, the devotee, the prophet. And the godly nonconformist of the old style requires one thing above all for that purpose, great healthiness, such healthiness as one not only possesses, but also constantly acquires and must acquire, because one unceasingly sacrifices it again, and must sacrifice it. And now, after having been long on the way in this fashion, we Argonauts of the ideal, more courageous perhaps than prudent, and often enough shipwrecked, and brought to grief, nevertheless dangerously healthy, always healthy again it would seem as if, in recompense for it all, that we have a still undiscovered country before us, the boundaries of which no one has yet seen, but beyond to all countries and corners of the ideal known hitherto. A world so overrich in the beautiful, the strange, the questionable, the frightful, and the divine, that our curiosity as well as our thirst for possession thereof have got out of hand, alas. Rat nothing will now any longer satisfy us. How could we still be content with the man of the present day after such outlooks, and with such a craving in our conscience and consciousness? Sad enough, but it is unavoidable that we should look on the worthiest aims and hopes of the man of the present day with ill-concealed amusement, and perhaps should no longer look at them. Another ideal runs on before us, a strange, tempting ideal full of danger, to which we should not like to persuade any one, because we do not so readily acknowledge any one as right thereto, the ideal of a spirit who plays naively, that is to say involuntarily, and from overflowing abundance and power with everything that has hitherto been called holy, good, intangible, or divine, to whom the loftiest conception which the people have reasonably made their measure of value would already practically imply danger, ruin, abasement, or at least relaxation, blindness, or temporary self-forgetfulness. The ideal of a humanly superhuman welfare and benevolence, which will often enough appear inhuman, for example, when put alongside of all past seriousness on earth, and alongside of all past solemnities in bearing, word, tone, look, morality, and pursuit, as their truest involuntary parody, and with which, nevertheless, perhaps the great seriousness only. Roman 14. Introduction. Commences when the proper interrogative mark is set up, the fate of the soul changes, the hour hand moves, and tragedy begins. And quote, although the figure of Zarathustra and a large number of the leading thoughts in this work had appeared much earlier in the dreams and writings of the author, thus spake Zarathustra did not actually come into being until the month of August, 188-1, in Sils Maria, and it was the idea of the eternal recurrence of all things which finally induced my brother to set forth his new views in poetic language, in regard to his first conception of this idea. His autobiographical sketch, Ex Homo, written in the autumn of 1888, contains the following passage. The fundamental idea of my work, namely, the eternal recurrence of all things, this highest of all possible formulas of a yesaying philosophy, first occurred to me in August, 188-1. I made a note of the thought on a sheet of paper, with the postscript, 6,000 feet beyond men and time. That day I happened to be wandering through the woods alongside of the lake of Silaplana, and I halted beside a huge, pyramidal and towering rock not far from Surley. It was then that the thought struck me. Looking back now, I find that exactly 2 months previous to this inspiration, I had had an omen of its coming in the form of a sudden and decisive alteration in my tastes, more particularly in music. It would even be possible to consider all Zarathustra as a musical composition. At all events, a very necessary condition in its production was a renaissance in myself of the art of hearing. In a small mountain resort Rocoro near Weissenda, where I spent the spring of 188-1, and my friend and maestro, Peter Cast, also one who had been born again, discovered that the phoenix music that hovered over us wore lighter and brighter plumes than it had done theretofore. Introduction X**. During the month of August 1881, my brother resolved to reveal the teaching of the eternal recurrence in dithyrambic and somatic form through the mouth of Zarathustra. Among the notes of this period we found a page on which is written the first definite plan of Thus Spake Zarathustra, midday and eternity, and guideposts to a new way of living / Beneath this is written, Zarathustra, born on Lake Urmi, left his home in his 30th year, went into the province of Beria, and during 10 years of solitude in the mountains, composed the Zenavesta. The sun of knowledge stands once more at midday, and the serpent of eternity lies coiled in its light. It is your time, ye midday brethren. In that summer of 1881, my brother, after many years of steadily declining health, began at last to rally, and it is to this first gush of the recovery of his once splendid bodily condition that we owe not only the joyful wisdom, which in its mood may be regarded as a prelude to Zarathustra, but also Zarathustra itself. Just as he was beginning to recuperate his health, however, an unkind destiny brought him a number of most painful personal experiences. His friends caused him many disappointments, which were the more bitter to him, inasmuch as he regarded friendship as such a sacred institution, and for the first time in his life he realized the whole horror of that loneliness to which, perhaps, all greatness is condemned. But to be forsaken is something very different from deliberately choosing blessed loneliness. How he longed, in those days, for the ideal friend who would thoroughly understand him, to whom he would be able to say all, and whom he imagined he had found at various periods in his life from his Romans 16. Introduction. Earliest youth onwards. Now, however, that the way he had chosen grew ever more perilous and steep, he found nobody who could follow him. He therefore created a perfect friend for himself in the ideal form of a majestic philosopher, and made this creation the preacher of his gospel to the world. Whether my brother would ever have written Thus Spake Zarathustra according to the first plan sketched in the summer of 1881, if he had not had the disappointments already referred to, is now an idle question, but perhaps where Zarathustra is concerned, we may also say with Master Eckhart, the fleetest beast to bear you to perfection is suffering. My brother writes as follows about the origin of the first part of Zarathustra, in the winter of 1882-83. I was living on the charming little Gulf of Rapallo, not far from Genoa, and between Chiavari and Cape Portofino. My health was not very good, the winter was cold and exceptionally rainy, and the small inn in which I lived was so close to the water, that at night my sleep would be disturbed if the sea were high. These circumstances were surely the very reverse of favorable. And yet, in spite of it all, and as if in demonstration of my belief that everything decisive comes to life in spite of every obstacle, it was precisely during this winter and in the midst of these unfavorable circumstances that my Zarathustra originated. In the morning I used to start out in a southerly direction up the glorious road to Zogli, which rises aloft through a forest of pines and gives one a view far out into the sea. In the afternoon, as often as my health permitted, I walked round the whole bay from Santa Margherita to beyond Portofino. This spot was all the more interesting to me, inasmuch as it was so dearly loved by the Emperor Frederick Roman III. In the autumn of 1886 I chanced to be there again, when he was revisiting this small, forgotten world of happiness for the last time. It was on Introduction. These two roads that all Zarathustra came to me, above all Zarathustra himself as a type. I ought rather to say that it was on these walks that these ideas waylaid me, and The first part of Zarathustra was written in about 10 days, that is to say, from the beginning to about the middle of February, 1883. The last lines were written precisely in the hallowed hour when Richard Wagner gave up the ghost in Venice. With the exception of the 10 days occupied in composing the first part of this book, my brother often referred to this winter as the hardest and sickliest he had ever experienced. He did not, however, mean thereby that his former disorders were troubling him, but that he was suffering from a severe attack of influenza which he had caught in Santa Margherita, and which tormented him for several weeks after his arrival in Genoa. As a matter of fact, however, what he complained of most was his spiritual condition, that indescribable forsakenness to which he gives such heartrending expression in Zarathustra. Even the reception first part met with at the hands of friends and acquaintances was extremely disheartening, for almost all those to whom he presented copies of the work misunderstood it. I found no one ripe for many of my thoughts. The case of Zarathustra proves that one can speak with clearness and yet not be heard by any one. My brother was very much discouraged by the feebleness of the response he was given, and as he was striving just then to give up the practice of taking hydrate of chloral, a drug he had begun to take while ill with influenza the following spring, spent in Rome, was a somewhat gloomy one for him. He writes about it as follows: I spent a melancholy spring in Rome, where I only just managed to live, and this was no easy matter. This city, which is absolutely unsuited to cute ex vili. Introduction. The poet-author of Zarathustra, and for the choice of which I was not responsible, made me inordinately miserable. I tried to leave it. I wanted to go to Aquila, the opposite of Rome in every respect, and actually found it in a spirit of enmity towards that city, just as I also shall found a city some day, as a memento of an atheist and genuine enemy of the Church, a person very closely related to me, the great Hohenstaufen, the Emperor Frederick Roman II. But fate lay behind it all. I had to return again to Rome. In the end I was obliged to be satisfied with the pies of Barberini after I had exerted myself in vain to find an anti-Christian quarter. I fear that on one occasion, to avoid bad smells as much as possible, I actually inquired at the Palazzo del Quirinale whether they could not provide a quiet room for a philosopher. In a chamber high above the pies just mentioned, from which one obtained a general view of Rome, and could hear the fountains plashing far below, the loneliest of all songs was composed the night song. About this time I was obsessed by an unspeakably sad melody, the refrain of which I recognized in the words, "Dead through him." Mortality. We remained somewhat too long in Rome that spring, and what with the effect of the increasing heat and the to scour aging circumstances already described, my brother resolved not to write any more, or in any case not to proceed with Zarathustra, although I offered to relieve him of all trouble in connection with the proofs and the publisher. When, however, we returned to Switzerland towards the end of June, and he found himself once more in the familiar and exhilarating air of the mountains, all his joyous, creative powers revived, and in a note to me announcing the dispatch of some manuscript, he wrote as follows: "I have engaged a place high for 3 months. Forsooth, I am the greatest fool to allow my courage to." Introduction, Roman 19. Be sapped from me by the climate of Italy. Now and again I am troubled by the thought, what next? My future is the darkest thing in the world to me, but as there still remains a great deal for me to do, I suppose I ought rather to think of doing this than of my future, and leave the rest to the end. The Gods. The second part of Zarathustra was written between 26th of June and the 6th July. This summer, finding myself once more in the sacred place where the first thought of Zarathustra flashed across my mind, I conceived the second part. 10 days sufficed. Neither for the second, the first, nor the third part have I required a day longer. He often used to speak of the ecstatic mood in which he wrote Zarathustra, how in his walks over hill and dale the ideas would crowd into his mind, and how he would note them down hastily in a notebook from which he would transcribe them on his return, sometimes working till midnight. He says in a letter to me, you can have no idea of the vehemence of such composition, and in Ex Homo Autumn 1888 describes as follows with passionate enthusiasm the incomparable mood in which he created Zarathustra. Has any one at the end of the 19th century any distinct notion of what poets of a stronger age understood by the word inspiration? If not, I will describe it. If one had the smallest vestige of superstition in one, it would hardly be possible to set aside completely the idea that one is the mere incarnation, mouthpiece, or medium of an almighty power. The idea of revelation in the sense that something becomes suddenly visible and audible with indescribable certainty and accuracy, which profoundly convulses and upsets one describes simply the matter of fact. One hears, one does not seek, one takes, one does not ask who gives, a thought said. Roman 20. Introduction. Denly flashes up like lightning. It comes with necessity, unhesitatingly. I have never had any choice in the matter. There is an ecstasy such that the immense strain of it is sometimes relaxed by a flood of tears, along with which one steps either rush or involuntarily lag alternately. There is the feeling that one is completely out of hand, with a very distinct consciousness of an endless number of fine thrills and quiverings to the very toes. There is a depth of happiness in which the painfulest and gloomiest do not operate as antitheses, but as condition, as demanded in the sense of necessary shades of color and such an overflow of light. There is an instinct for rhythmic relations which embraces wide areas of forms. Length. The need of a wide embracing rhythm is almost the measure of the force of an inspiration, a sort of counterpart to its pressure and tension. Everything happens quite involuntarily, as if in a tempestuous outburst of freedom, of absoluteness, of power and divinity. The involuntariness of the figures and similes is the most remarkable thing. One loses all perception of what constitutes the figure and what constitutes the simile. Everything seems to present itself as the readiest, the correctest, and the simplest means of expression. It actually seems, to use one of Zarathustra's own phrases, as if all things came unto one, and would fain be similes. Here do all things come caressingly to thy talk, and flatter thee, for they want to ride upon thy back. On every simile dost thou here ride to every truth. Here fly open unto thee all being S-words and word cabinets. Here all being wanted to become words. Here all becoming wanted to learn of thee how to talk. This is my experience of inspiration. I do not doubt but that one would have to go back thousands of years in order to find someone who could say to me, "It is mine also." In the autumn of 1883, my brother left the Ingadian Court. Introduction, Roman 21. Germany, and stayed there a few weeks. In the following winter, after wandering somewhat erratically through Stresa, Genoa, and Spezia, he landed in Nice, where the climate so happily promoted his creative powers that he wrote the third part of Zarathustra. In the winter, beneath the house-inspired Nice, which then looked down upon me for the first time in my life, I found the third Zarathustra and came to the end of my task, the whole having occupied me scarcely a year. Many hidden corners and heights in the landscapes round about Nice are hallowed to me by unforgettable moments. The decisive chapter entitled Old and New Tables was composed in the very difficult ascent from the station to Eza, that one dareful Moorish village in the rocks. My most creative moments were always accompanied by unusual muscular activity. The body is inspired, let us waive the question of the soul. I might often have been seen dancing in those days. Without a suggestion of fatigue, I could then walk for 7 or 8 hours on end among the hills. I slept well and laughed well. I was perfectly robust and patient. As we have seen, each of the 3 parts of Zarathustra was written, after a more or less short period of preparation, in about 10 days. The composition of the 4th part alone was broken by occasional interruptions. The first notes relating to this part were written while he and I were staying together in Zurich in September 1884. In the following November, while staying at Mentone, he began to elaborate these notes, and after a long pause, finished the manuscript at Nice between the end of January and the middle of February 1885. And brother then called this part the 4th and last, but even before, and shortly after it had been privately printed, he wrote to me saying that he still intended writing a 5th and 6th part, and notes relating to these parts are now in my possession. This X11 Introduction, 4th part the original MS, of which contains this note, only for my friends, not for the public, is written in a particularly personal spirit, and those few to whom he presented a copy of it he pledged to the strictest secrecy concerning its contents. He often thought of making this 4th part public also, but doubted whether he would ever be able to do so without considerably altering certain portions of it. At all events, he resolved to distribute this manuscript production, of which only 40 copies were printed, only among those who had proved themselves worthy of it, and it speaks eloquently of his utter loneliness and need of sympathy in those days that he had occasion to present only 7 copies of his book according to this resolution. Already at the beginning of this history I hinted at the reasons which led my brother to select a Persian as the incarnation of his ideal of the majestic philosopher. His reasons, however, for choosing Zarathustra of all others to be his mouthpiece, he gives us in the following words. People have never asked me, as they should have done, what the name Zarathustra precisely means in the mouth of the first immoralist, for what distinguishes that philosopher from all others in the past is the very fact that he was exactly the reverse of an immoralist. Zarathustra was the first to see in the struggle between good and evil the essential wheel in the working of things. The translation of morality into the metaphysical, as force, cause, end in itself, was this work. But the very question suggests its own answer. Zarathustra created the most portentous error, morality. Consequently, he should also be the first to perceive that error, not only because he has had longer and greater experience of the subject than any other thinker. All history is the experimental refutation of the theory of the so-called moral order of things. The more important point is, Introduction XX Lie, that Zarathustra was more truthful than any other thinker. In his teaching alone do we meet with truthfulness upheld as the highest virtue, i.e. The reverse of the cowardice of the ideal is to flee from reality. Zarathustra had more courage in his body than any other thinker before or after him. To tell the truth and to aim straight, that is the first Persian virtue. Am I understood? The overcoming of morality through itself. Through truthfulness, the overcoming of the moralist through his opposite through me. That is what the name * Zarathustra means in my mouth. And quote. Elizabeth Forster Nietzsche. Nietzsche Archives. Weimar, December 1905. Is Spake 7 Zarathustra as prologue. When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home, and the lake of his home, and went into the mountains. There he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not weary of it. But at last his heart changed, and rising one morning with the rosy dawn, he went before the sun, and spake thus unto it. Thou great star, what would be thy happiness if thou hadst not those for whom thou shinest? For 10 years hast thou climbed hither unto my cave. Thou wouldst have wearied of thy light and of the journey, had it not been for me, mine eagle, and my serpent. But we awaited thee every morning, took from thee thine overflow, and blessed thee for it. Lo, I am weary of my wisdom, like the bee that hath gathered too much honey. I need hands outstretched to take it. I would fain bestow and distribute, until the wise have once more become joyous in their folly, and the poor happy in their riches. Therefore must I descend into the deep, as thou dost in the evening, when thou goest behind the sea, and givest light also to the nether world, thou exuberant star. Like thee must I go down, as men say, to whom I shall descend. For Zarathustra's prologue. Bless me, then, thou tranquil eye, that canst behold even the greatest happiness without envy. Bless the cup that is about to overflow, that the water may flow golden out of it, and carry everywhere the reflection of thy bliss. Lo! This cup is again going to empty itself, and Zarathustra is again going to be a man. Thus began Zarathustra's downgoing. Zarathustra went down the mountain alone, no one meeting him. When he entered the forest, however, there suddenly stood before him an old man, who had left his holy cot to seek roots. And thus spake the old man to Zarathustra: No stranger to me is this wanderer. Many years ago passed he by. Zarathustra he was called, but he hath altered. Then thou carriedst thine ashes into the mountains. Wilt thou now carry thy fire into the valleys? Fearest thou not the incendiary Estum? Yea, I recognize Zarathustra. Pure is his eye, and no loathing lurketh about his mouth. Goeth he not along like a dancer? Altered is Zarathustra. A child hath Zarathustra become, and awakened one is Zarathustra. What wilt thou do in the land of the sleepers? As in the sea haste thou lived in solitude, and it hath borne thee up. Alas, wilt thou now go ashore? Alas, wilt thou again drag thy body thyself? Zarathustra answered, I love mankind. Zarathustra's prologue 5. Why, said the saint, did I go into the forest and the desert? Was it not because I loved men far too well? Now I love God. Men I do not love. Man is a thing too imperfect for me. Love to man would be fatal to me. And quoth Zarathustra answered, What spake I of love? I am bring in gifts unto men. Give them nothing, said the saint. Take rather part of their load, and carry it along with them that will be most agreeable unto them, if only it be agreeable unto thee. If, however, thou wilt give unto them, give them no more than an alms, and let them also beg for it. And quoth No, replied Zarathustra, I give no alms. I am not poor. Enough for that. The saint laughed at Zarathustra, and spake thus: Then see to it that they accept thy treasures. They are distrustful of anchorites, and do not believe that we come with gifts. The fall of our footsteps ringeth too hollow through their streets. And just as at night, when they are in bed, and hear a man abroad long before sunrise, so they ask themselves concerning us, Where goeth the thief? Go not to men, but stay in the forest. Go rather to the animals. Why not be like me, a bear amongst bears, a bird amongst birds? And what doth the saint in the forest? Asked Zarathustra. The saint answered, I make hymns and sing them, and in making hymns I laugh and weep and mumble. Thus do I praise God. With singing, weeping, laughing, and mumbling do I praise the God who is my God. But what dost thou bring us as a gift? When Zarathustra had heard these words, he bowed to the saint and said, What should I have to give thee? Let me rather hurry hence, lest I take aught away from thee. And thus. 6. Zarathustra's prologue. They parted from one another, the old man and Zarathustra, laughing like schoolboys. When Zarathustra was alone, however, he said to his heart, Could it be possible? This old saint in the forest hath not yet heard of it, that God is dead. And quoth When Zarathustra arrived at the nearest town which adjoineth the forest, he found many people assembled in the market-place, for it had been announced that a rope dancer would give a performance. And Zarathustra spake thus unto the people, teach you the Superman. Man is something that is to be surpassed. What have ye done to surpass man? All beings hitherto have created something beyond themselves, and ye want to be the ebb of that great tide, and would rather go back to the beast than surpass man. What is the ape to man? A laughing stock, a thing of shame. And just the same shall man be to the Superman, a laughing stock, a thing of shame. Ye have made your way from the worm to man, and much within you is still worm. Once were ye apes, and even yet man is more of an ape than any of the apes. Even the wisest among you is only a disharmony and hybrid of plant and phantom. But do I bid you become phantoms, or plants? Lo, I reach you the Superman. The Superman is the meaning of the earth. Let your will say, the Superman shall be the meaning of the earth. I conjure you, my brethren, remain true to the earth, and be Zarathustra's prole. Leave not those who speak unto you of super-earthly hopes. Poisoners are they, whether they know it or not. Despisers of life are they, decaying ones and poison ones themselves, of whom the earth is weary, so away with them. Once blasphemy against God was the greatest blasphemy, but God died, and therewith also those blasphemers. To blaspheme the earth is now the dreadfulest sin, and to rate the heart of the unknowable higher than the meaning of the earth. Once the soul looked contemptuously on the body, and then that contempt was the supreme thing, the soul which the body meagre, ghastly, and famished. Thus it ought to escape from the body and the earth. Oh, that soul was itself meagre, ghastly, and famished, and cruelty was the delight of that soul. But ye also, my brethren, tell me, what doth your body say about your soul? Is your soul not poverty, arid pollution, and wretched self-complacency? Verily, a polluted stream is man. One must be a sea to receive a polluted stream without becoming impure. Lo, I teach you the Superman. He is that sea, in him can your great contempt be submerged. What is the greatest thing ye can experience? It is the hour of great contempt, the hour in which even your happiness be cometh loathsome unto you, and so also your reason and virtue. The hour when ye say, what good is my happiness? It is poverty and pollution and wretched self-complacency, but my happiness should justify existence itself. The hour when ye say, what good is my reason? Doth it long for knowledge as the lion for his food? It is poverty and pollution on a wretched self-complacency. The hour when ye say, what good is my virtue? As yet it hath no asterisk one made me passionate. How weary I am of my good. 8 Zarathustra s prologue. And my bad. It is all poverty and pollution and wretched self-complacency. The hour when ye say, what good is my justice? I do not see that I am fervor and fuel. The just, however, are fervor and fuel and quat. The hour when we say, what good is my pity? Is not pity the cross on which he is nailed who loveth man? But my pity is not a crucifixion, and quat. Have ye ever spoken thus? Have ye ever cried thus? Ah, would that I had heard you crying thus. It is not your sin, it is your self-satisfaction that crieth unto heaven. Your very sparingness in sin crieth unto heaven. Where is the lightning to lick you with its tongue? Where is the frenzy with which you should be inoculated? Lo, I teach you the Superman. He is that lightning, he is that frenzy. When Zarathustra had thus spoken, one of the people called out, we have now heard enough of the rope dancer. It is time now for us to see him. And all the people laughed at Zarathustra, but the rope dancer, who thought the words applied to Ammon, began his performance. Zarathustra, however, looked at the people and wondered. Then he spake thus: Man is a rope stretched between the animal, and the Superman a rope over an abyss. A dangerous crossing, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous trembling and halting. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. Zarathustra s prologue 9. What is lovable in man is that he is an overgoing and a down-going. I love those that know not how to live except as down-goers, for they are the overgoers. I love the great despisers, because they are the great adorers, and arrows of longing for the other shore. I love those who do not first seek a reason beyond the stars for going down and being sacrifices, but sacrifice themselves to the earth, that the earth of the Supermen may hereafter arrive. I love him who lieth in order to know, and seeketh to know, in order that the Supermen may hereafter live. Thus seeketh he his own down-going. I love him who laboureth and inventeth, that he may build the house for the Superman, and prepare for him earth, animal, and plant, for thus seeketh he his own down-going. I love him who loveth his virtue, for virtue is the will to down-going, and an arrow of longing. I love him who reserveth no share of spirit for himself, but wanteth to be wholly the spirit of his virtue. Thus walketh he as spirit over the bridge. I love him who maketh his virtue his inclination and destiny. Thus, for the sake of his virtue, he is willing to live on or live no more. I love him who desireth not too many virtues. One virtue is more of a virtue than two, because it is more of a not for one s destiny to cling to. I love him whose soul is lavish, who wanteth no thanks on it, doth not give back, for he always bestoweth, and desireth not to keep for himself. One love him who is ashamed when the dice fall in his favour, and who then asketh, Am I a dishonest player? For he is willing to succumb. Eo. Zarathustra s prologue. I love him who scattereth golden words in advance of his deeds, and always doth more than he promiseth, for he seeketh his own down-going. I love him who justifieth the future ones and redeemeth the past ones, for he is willing to succumb through the present ones. I love him who chasteneth his God, because he loveth his God, for he must succumb through the wrath of his God. I love him whose soul is deep even in the wounding, and may succumb through a small matter, thus goeth he willingly over the bridge. I love him whose soul is so overfull that he forgetteth himself, and all things are in him, thus all things become his down-going. I love him who is of a free spirit and a free heart, thus is his head only ths bowels of his heart, however, causeth his down-going. I love all who are like heavy drops falling one by one out of the dark cloud that lowereth over man. They herald the coming of the lightning, and succumb as heralds. Lo, I am a herald of the lightning, and a heavy drop at it. The cloud, the lightning, however, is the Superman. When Zarathustra had spoken these words, he again looked at the people, and was silent. There they stand, said he to his heart. There they laugh. They understand me not. I am not the mouth for these ears. Must one first batter their ears, that they may learn to hear? With their eyes? Must one clatter like kettledrums ere penny? I Zarathustra s prologate, potential preachers, or do they only believe the stammerer? They have something whereof they are proud. What do they call it, that which maketh them proud? Culture. They call it ill-distinguished, them from the Goatherds. They dislike, therefore, to hear of contempt of themselves, so I will appeal to their pride. I will speak unto them of Teli, a most contemptible thing. That, however, is the last man. And thus spake Zarathustra unto the people. It is time for man to fix his goal. It is time for man to plant the germ of his highest hope. Still is his soil rich enough for it, but that soil will one day be poor and exhausted, and no lofty tree will any longer be able to grow thereon. Alas! There cometh the time when man will no longer launch the arrow of his longing beyond man, and the string of his bow will have unlearned to whiz. I tell you, one must still have chaos in one to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, ye have still chaos in you. Alas! There cometh the time when man will no longer give birth to any star. Alas! There cometh the time of the most despicable man, who can no longer despise himself. Lo! I show you the last man. What is love? What is creation? What is longing? What is a star? So asketh the last man, and blinketh. The earth hath then become small, and on it there hoppeth the last man, who maketh everything small. His species is ineradicable, like that of the ground flea. The last man lieth. Longest. We lie of discovered happiness, say the last men, and blink thereby. They have left the regions where it is hard to live, for theft. 12. Zarathustra s prologue. Need warmth. One still loveth one as neighbor, and rubbeth against him, for one needeth warmth. Turning ill, and being distrustful, they consider sinful. They walk warily. He is a fool who still stumbleth over stones or men. A little poison now and then, that maketh pleasant dreams, and much poison that lasts for a pleasant death. One still worketh, for work is a pastime, but one is careful lest the pastime should hurt one. One no longer becometh poor or rich, both are too burdensome. Who still wanteth to rule? Who still he wanteth to obey? Both are too burdensome. No shepherd and one herd. Everyone wanteth the same. Everyone is equal. He who hath other sentiments goeth voluntarily into the madhouse. Formerly all the world was insane, say the subtlest of them, and blink thereby. They are clever and know all that hath happened, so there is no end to their raillery. People still fall out, but are soon reconciled, otherwise it spoileth their stomachs. They have their little pleasures for the day, and their little pleasures for the night, but they have a regard for health. We have discovered happiness, say the last men, and blink thereby. And here ended the first discourse of Zarathustra, which is also called the prologue, for at this point the shouting and mirth of the multitude interrupted him. Give us this last man, O Zarathustra. They called out, make us into these last men. Then will we make thee a present of the Superman. And all the people exulted and smacked their lips. Zarathustra, however, turned sad, and said to his heart, They understand me not. I am not the mouth for these ears. Zarathustra s prologue 13. Too long, perhaps, have I lived in the mountains, too much have I hearkened unto the brooks and trees, now do I speak unto them as unto the Goatherds. Calm is my soul, and clear, like the mountains in the morning. But they think me cold, and a mocker with terrible jests. And now do they look at me and laugh, and while they laugh they hate me too. There is ice in their laughter. 6. Then, however, something happened which made every mouth mute and every eye fixed. In the meantime, of course, the rope dancer had commenced his performance. He had come out at a little door, and was going along the rope which was stretched between two towers, so that it hung above the market-place and the people. When he was just midway across, the little door opened once more, and a gaudily dressed fellow like a buffoon sprang out, and went rapidly after the first one. Go. On, Hallfoot, cried his frightful voice. Go on, lazy-bones, interloper, sallow-face. Lest I tickle thee with my heel. What dost thou here between the towers? In the tower is the place for thee. Thou shouldst be locked up. To one better than thyself thou blockest the way. And with every word he came nearer and nearer the first one. When, however, he was but a step behind, there happened the frightful thing which made every mouth mute and every eye fixed. He uttered a yell like a devil, and jumped over the other who was in his way. The latter, however, when he thus saw his rival triumph, lost at the same time his head and his footing on the rope. He threw his pole away, and shot downward faster than it, like an eddy of arms and legs, into the depth. The market-place and the people were. 14. Zarathustra s prologue. Like the sea when the storm cometh on, they all flew apart and in disorder, especially where the body was about to fall. Zarathustra, however, remained standing, and just beside him fell the body, badly injured and disfigured, but not yet dead. After a while consciousness returned to the shattered man, and he saw Zarathustra kneeling beside him. What art thou doing there? said he at last, I knew long ago that the devil would trip me up. Now he draggeth me to hell. Wilt thou prevent him? On mine honour, my friend, answered Zarathustra, there is nothing of all that whereof thou speakest. There is no devil and no hell. Thy soul will be dead even sooner than thy body. Fear, therefore, nothing any more. The man looked up distrustfully. If thou speakest the truth, said he, I lose nothing when I lose my life. I am not much more than an animal which hath been taught to dance by blows and standards there. Not at all, said Zarathustra, thou hast made danger thy calling. Therein there is nothing contemptible. Now thou perishest by thy calling, therefore will I bury thee with mine own hands. When Zarathustra had said this, the dying one did not reply further, but he moved his hand as if he sought the hand of Zarathustra in gratitude. Meanwhile the evening came on, and the market-place veiled itself in gloom. Then the people dispersed, for even curiosity and terror become fatigued. Zarathustra, however, still sat beside the dead man on the ground, absorbed in Zarathustra S. Prologue 15. Thought, so he forgot the time. But at last it became night, and a cold wind blew upon the lonely one. Then arose Zarathustra, and said to his heart, Verily, a fine catch of fish had Zarathustra made to-day. It is not a man he hath caught, but a corpse. Sombre is human life, and as yet without meaning. A buffoon may be faithful to it. I want to teach men the sense of their existence, which is the Superman, the lightning out of the dark cloud man. But still am I far from them, and my sense speaketh not unto their sense. To men I am still something between a fool and a corpse. Gloomy is the night, gloomy are the ways of Zarathustra. Come, thou cold and stiff companion, I carry thee to the place where I shall bury thee with mine own hands. 8. When Zarathustra had said this to his heart, he put the corpse upon his shoulders, and set out on his way. Yet had he not gone 100 steps, when there stole a man up to him, and whispered in his ear and low. He that spake was the buffoon from the tower. Leave this town, O Zarathustra, said he, there are too many here who hate thee. The good and just hate thee, and call thee their enemy and despiser. The believers in the orthodox belief hate thee, and call thee a danger to the multitude. It was thy good fortune to be laughed at, and verily thou spakest like a buffoon. It was thy good fortune to associate with the dead dog. By so humiliating thyself thou hast saved thy life to-day. Depart, however, from this town, or tomorrow I shall jump over thee, a living man over a dead one. And 16. Zarathustra S. Prologue. When he had said this, the buffoon vanished. Zarathustra, however, went on through the dark streets. At the gate of the town the grave-diggers met him. They shone their torch on his face, and recognizing Zarathustra, they sorely derided him. Zarathustra is carrying away the dead dog. A fine thing Tinat Zarathustra hath turned a grave-digger, for our hands are too cleanly for that roast. Will Zarathustra steal the bite from the devil? Well then, good luck to the repast. If only the devil is not a better thief than Zarathustra. He will steal them both, he will eat them both. And they laughed among themselves, and put their heads together. Zarathustra made no answer thereto, but went on his way. When he had gone on for 2 hours, past forests and swamps, he had heard too much of the hungry howling of the wolves, and he himself became hungry, so he halted at a lonely house, in which a light was burning. Hunger attacketh me, said Zarathustra, like a robber. Among forests and swamps my hunger attacketh me, and late in the night strange humours have my hunger. Often it cometh to me, only after a repast, and all day it hath failed to come. Where hath it been, and what? And thereupon Zarathustra knocked at the door of the house. An old man appeared, who carried a light, and asked, Who cometh unto me in my bad sleep, and what? A living man and a dead one, said Zarathustra. Give me something to eat and drink. I forgot it during the day. He that feedeth the hungry refresheth his own soul, saith wisdom, and quoth. The old man withdrew, but came back immediately, and offered Zarathustra bread and wine. A bad country for the hungry, said he, that is why I live here, animal and man. Come unto me, the anchorite, but bid thy companion eat oxy. Zarathustra S. Prologue 17. Drink also, he is wearier than thou. Zarathustra answered, My companion is dead. I shall hardly be able to persuade him to eat. That doth not concern me, said the old man sullenly. He that knocketh at my door must take what I offer him. Eat and fare ye well. Thereafter Zarathustra again went on for 2 hours, trusting to the path and the light of the stars, for he was an experienced night walker, and liked to look into the face of all tie slept. When the morning dawned, however, Zarathustra found himself in a thick forest, and no path was any longer visible. He then put the dead man in a hollow tree at his head, for he wanted to protect him from the wolves, and laid himself down on the ground in moss. And immediately he fell asleep, tired in body, but with a tranquil soul. Long slept Zarathustra, and not only the rosy dawn passed over his head, but also the morning. At last, however, his eyes opened, and amazedly he gazed into the forest and the stillness, amazedly he gazed into himself. Then he arose quickly, like a seafarer who all at once sees the land, and he shouted for joy, for he saw a new truth. And he spake thus to his heart, A light hath dawned upon me. I need companions, living ones, not dead companions and corpses, which I carry with me where I will. But I need living companions, who will follow me because they want to follow themselves, and to the place where I will. A light hath dawned upon me. Not to the people is Zarathustra to speak, but to companions. Zarathustra shall not be the herd as herdsman and hound. Yea, Zarathustra as prologue. To allure many from the herd, for that purpose have I come. The people and the herd must be angry with me, a rob. First shall Zarathustra be called by the herdsmen. Herdsmen, I say, but they call themselves the good and just. Herdsmen, I say, but they call themselves the believers in the orthodox belief. Behold the good and just. Whom do they hate most? Him who breaketh up their tables of values, the breaker, the law. Breaker, he, however, is the creator. Behold the believers of all beliefs. Whom do they hate most? Him who breaketh up their tables of values, the breaker. The lawbreaker, he, however, is the creator. Companions, the creator seeketh, not corpses and not herds or believers either. Fellow creators, the creator seeketh. Those who grade new values on new tables. Companions, the creator seeketh, and fellow reapers, for everything is ripe for the harvest with him, but he lacketh a 100 sickles, so he plucketh the ears of corn, and is vexed. Companions, the creator seeketh, and such as know how to whet their sickles. Destroyers will they be called, and despisers of good and evil, but they are the reapers and rejoicers. Fellow creators, Zarathustra seeketh, fellow reapers and fellow rejoicers, Zarathustra seeketh. What hath he to do with herds and herdsmen and corpses? And thou, my first companion, rest in peace. Well have I buried thee in thy hollow tree, well have I hid thee from the wolves. But I part from thee, the time hath arrived. Twixt rosy dawn and rosy dawn there came unto me a new truth. I am not to be a herdsman, I am not to be a grave digger. Not any more will I discourse unto the people. For the last time have I spoken unto the dead. Zarathustra S. Prologue 19. With the creators, the reapers, and the rejoicers will I associate it. The rainbow will I show them, and all the stairs to them. Superman. To the lone dwellers will I sing my song, and to the twain dwellers, and unto him who hath still ears for the unheard, will I make the heart heavy with my happiness. I make for my goal, I follow my course, over the loitering and tardy will I leap. Thus let my ongoing be their down. Going. 10. This had Zarathustra said to his heart, when the sun stood at noontide. Then he looked inquiringly aloft, for he heard above him the sharp call of a bird. And behold, an eagle swept through the air in wide circles, and on it hung a serpent, not like a prey, but like a friend, for it kept itself coiled round the eagle's neck. They are mine animals, said Zarathustra, and rejoiced in his heart, the proudest animal under the sun, and the wisest animal under the sun. They have come out to reconnoiter. They want to know whether Zarathustra still live. Verily do I still live. More dangerous have I found it among men than among animals, and dangerous paths go with Zarathustra. Let mine animals lead me, and thought. When Zarathustra had said this, he remembered the words of the saint in the forest. Then he sighed and spake thus to his heart, Would that I were wiser. Would that I were wise from TTM. Very heart, like my serpent. 4-0. Zarathustra's Prologue. For I am asking the impossible. Therefore do I ask my pride to go always with my wisdom. And if my wisdom should some day forsake me, alas, it loveth to fly away. May my pride then fly with my folly. Thus began Zarathustra's downgoing. Thus spake Zarathustra. F1RST part. The three metamorphoses. Three metamorphoses of the spirit do I designate to you. Now the spirit becometh a camel a lion, and the lion at last a child. Many heavy things are there for the spirit, the strong low-bearing spirit in which reverence dwelleth, for the heavy, and the heaviest longeth its strength. What is heavy? So asketh the low-bearing spirit, then kneeleth it down like the camel, and wanteth to be well laden. What is the heaviest thing, ye heroes? Asketh the low-bearing spirit, that I may take it upon me and rejoice in my strength. Is it not this, to humiliate oneself in order to mortify one's pride, to exhibit one's folly in order to mock at one's wisdom? Or is it this, to desert our cause when it celebrateth its triumph, to ascend high mountains to tempt the tempter? Or is it this, to feed on the acorns and grass of knowledge, and for the sake of truth to suffer hunger of soul? Or is it this, to be sick and dismiss comforters, and make friends of the deaf, who never hear thy requests? Or is it this, to go into foul water when it is the water of truth, and not disclaim cold frogs and hot toads? Or is it this, to love those who despise us, and give one's hand to the phantom when it is going to frighten us? All these heaviest things the low-bearing spirit taketh upon itself, and like the camel, which when laden hasteneth into the wilderness, so hasteneth the spirit into its wilderness. 23. 24. Thus spake Zarathustra. But in the loneliest wilderness happeneth the second metamorphosis. Here the spirit becometh a lion, freedom will it capture, and lordship in its own wilderness. Its last lord it here seeketh, hostile will it be to him, and to its last god, for victory will it struggle with the great dragon. What is the great dragon, which the spirit is no longer inclined to call Lord and God? Thou shalt is the great dragon, called. But the spirit of the lion saith, I will. Thou shalt lieth in its path, sparkling with gold a scale-covered beast, and on every scale glittereth golden, thou shalt. The values of 1,000 years glitter on those scales, and thus speaketh the mightiest of all dragons, all the values of things glitter on me. All values have already been created, and all created values do I represent. Verily, there shall be no I will any more. Thus speaketh the dragon. My brethren, wherefore is there need of the lion in the spirit? Why suffereth not the beast of burden, which renounceth and is reverent, to create new values that even the lion cannot yet accomplish, but to create itself freedom for new creating that can the might of the lion do, to create itself freedom, and give a holy mate even unto duty, for that, my brethren, there is need of the lion, to assume the right to new values that is the most for me. Stable assumption for a low-bearing and reverent spirit. Verily, unto such a spirit it is praying, and the work of a beast of prey. As its holiest, it once loved thou shalt, now is it forced to find illusion and arbitrariness even in the holiest things, that it may capture freedom from its love. The lion is needed for HIs can't read. The academic shares of virtue 2%. But tell me, my brethren, what the child can do, which evil the lion could not do. Why hath the praying lion still to be seen? O my child, innocence is the child, and forgetfulness, a new beginning, a game, a self-rolling wheel, a first movement, a holy yea. I for the game of creating, my brethren, there is needed I holy yea unto life. Its own will willeth now the spirit, his own world winneth the world as outcast. 3 metamorphoses of the spirit have I designated to you, how the spirit became the camel a lion, and the lion at last a child. Thus spake Zarathustra, and at that time he abode in the town which is called the Pied Cow. 2. The academic chairs of virtue. People commended unto Zarathustra a wise man, as one who could discourse well about sleep and virtue. Greatly was he honored and rewarded for it, and all the youths sat before his chair. To him went Zarathustra, and sat among the youths before his chair. And thus spake the wise man, respect and modesty in presence of sleep, that is the first thing, and to go out of the way of all who sleep badly and keep awake at night. Modest is even the thief in presence of sleep, he always stealeth softly through the night. Modest, however, is the night watchman, immodestly he carrieth his horn. 26. Thus spake Zarathustra, no small art is it to sleep, it is necessary for that purpose to keep awake all day. 10 times a day must thou overcome thyself, that causeth wholesome weariness, and is poppy to the soul. 10 times must thou reconcile again with thyself, for overcoming is bitterness, and badly sleep the unreconciled. 10 truths must thou find during the day, otherwise wilt thou seek truth during the night, and thy soul will have been hungry. 10 times must thou laugh during the day, and be cheerful, otherwise thy stomach, the father of affliction, will disturb thee in the night. Few people know it, but one must have all the virtues in order to sleep well. Shall I bear false witness? Shall I commit adultery? Shall I covet my neighbor as maidservant? All that would ill accord with good sleep. And even if one have all the virtues, there is still one thing needful, to send the virtues themselves to sleep at the right time, that they may not quarrel with one another, the good females. And about thee, thou unhappy one, peace with God and thy neighbor, so desireth good sleep, and peace also with thy neighbor as devil, otherwise it will haunt thee in the night. Honor to the government, and obedience, and also to the crooked government, so desireth good sleep. How can one help it, if power liketh to walk on crooked legs? He who leadeth his sheep to the greenest pasture shall always be for any the best shepherd, so doth it accord with good sleep. The academic chairs of virtue 2J. Many honors I want not, nor great treasures, they excite the spleen. But it is bad sleeping without a good name, and a little treasure. A small company is more welcome to me than a bad one, but they must come and go at the right time, so doth it accord with good sleep. Well, also do the poor in spirit please me, they promote sleep. Blessed are they, especially if one always give in to them. Thus passeth the day unto the virtuous. When night cometh, then take I good care not to summon sleep. It disliketh to be summoned sleep, the lord of the virtues. But I think of what I have done and thought during the day. Thus ruminating, patient as a cow, I ask myself, what were thy 10 overcomings, and what were the 10 reconciliations, and the 10 truths, and the 10 laughters with which my heart enjoyed itself. Thus pondering, and cradled by 40 thoughts, it overtaketh me all at once sleep, the unsummoned, the lord of the virtues. Sleep tappeth on mine eye, and it turneth heavy. Sleep toucheth my mouth, and it remaineth open. Verily, on soft souls doth it come to me, the dearest of thieves, and stealeth from me my thoughts. Stupid do I then stand, like this academic chair. But not much longer do I then stand. I already lie. When Zarathustra heard the wise man thus speak, he laughed in his heart, for thereby had a light dawned upon him, and thus spake he to his heart. A fool seemeth this wise man with his 40 thoughts, but I believe he knoweth well how to sleep. Happy even is he who lieth near this wise man. Such sleep as for now is even th ru rcrh a thick wall, it is contagious. 28. Thus spake Zarathustra. A magic resideth even in his academic chair, and not in vain did the youth sit before the preacher of virtue. His wisdom is to keep awake in order to sleep well. And verily, if life had no sense, and had I to choose nonsense, this would be the desirablest nonsense for me also. Now know I well what people sought formerly above all else when they sought teachers of virtue. Good sleep they sought for themselves, and poppy-head virtues to promote it. To all those belauded sages of the academic chairs, wisdom was sleep without dreams. They knew no higher significance of life. Even at present, to be sure, there are some like this preacher of virtue, and not always so honorable, but their time is past, and not much longer do they stand. There they already lie. Blessed are those drowsy ones, for they shall soon nod to sleep. Thus spake Zarathustra. J. Backworldsman. Once on a time, Zarathustra also cast his fancy beyond man, like all backworldsmen. The work of a suffering and tortured god did the world then seem to me. The dream and diction of a god did the world then seem to me, colored vapors before the eyes of a divinely dissatisfied one. Good and evil, and joy and woe, and I and thou colored. Backworldsman 29. Vapors did they seem to me before creative eyes. The Creator wished to look away from himself, thereupon he created the world. Intoxicant ng joy is it for the sufferer to look away from his suffering and forget himself. Intoxicating joy and self-forget. Ting, did the world once seem to me. This world, the eternally imperfect and eternal contradict. Tiana's image and imperfect image and intoxicating joy to its imperfect Creator. Thus did the world once seem to me. Thus once on a time did I also cast my fancy beyond man, like all backworldsmen, beyond man, forsooth. Ah, ye brethren, the God whom I created was human work and human madness, like all the gods. A man was he, and only a poor fragment of a man and ego. Out of mine own ashes and glow it came unto me, that phantom, and verily it came not unto me from the beyond. What happened, my brethren? I surpassed myself, the suffering one. I carried mine own ashes to the mountain. A brighter flame I contrived for myself. And lo, thereupon the phantom withdrew from me. To me the convalescent would it now be suffering and torment to believe in such phantoms. Suffering would it now be to me, and humiliation. Thus speak I to backworldsmen. Suffering was it and impotence that created all back worlds, and the short madness of happiness, which only the greatest sufferer experienced. Weariness, which seeketh to get to the ultimate with one leap with a death leap, a poor ignorant weariness, unwilling even to will any longer, that created all gods and backworlds. Believe me, my brethren, it was the body which despaired. Of the body it groped with the angers, or the infatuated spirit, at the ultimate walls. 30. Thus spake Zarathustra. Believe me, my brethren, it was the body which despaired of the earth it heard the bowels of existence speaking unto it. And then it sought to get through the ultimate walls with its head, and not with its head only into the other world, and quoth, but that other world is well concealed from man, that dehumanized, inhuman world, which is a celestial knot, and the bowels of existence do not speak unto man, except as man. Verily, it is difficult to prove all being, and hard to make it speak. Tell me, ye brethren, is not the strangest of all things best proved? Yea, this ego, with its contradiction and perplexity, speaketh most uprightly of its being this creating, willing, valuing ego, which is the measure and value of things. And this most upright existence, the ego, it speaketh of the body, and still employeth the body, even when it museth and raveth and fluttereth with broken wings. Always more uprightly learneth it to speak the ego, and the more it learneth, the more doth it find titles and honors for the body and the earth. A new pride taught me mine ego, and that teach I unto men, no longer to thrust one's head into the sand of celestial things, but to carry it freely, a terrestrial head, which giveth meaning to the earth. Anew will teach I unto men to choose that path which man hath followed blindly, and to approve of it, and no longer to slink aside from it, like the sick and perishing. The sick and perishing it was they who despised the body and the earth, and invented the heavenly world and the redeeming blood drops. But even those sweet and sad poisons they borrowed from the body and the earth. From their misery they sought escape, and the stars were asterisk. Backworldsmen 3, too remote for them. Then they sighed, oh that there were heavenly paths by which to steal into another existence and into happiness. Then they contrived for themselves thereby baths, and bloody draughts. Beyond the sphere of their body and this earth they now fancied themselves transported, these ungrateful ones. But to what did they owe the convulsion and rapture of their transport? To their body and this earth. Gentle is Zarathustra to the sickly. Verily, he is not indignant at their modes of consolation and ingratitude. May they become convalescents and overcomers, and create higher bodies for themselves. Neither is Zarathustra indignant at a convalescent who looketh tenderly on his delusions, and at midnight stealeth round the grave of his God, but sickness and a sick frame remain even in his tears. Many sickly ones have there always been among those who muse and languish for God. Violently they hate the discerning ones, and the latest of virtues, which is uprightness. Backward they always gaze toward dark ages. Then, indeed, were delusion and faith something different. Raving of the reason was likeness to God, and doubt was sin. Too well do I know those godlike ones. They insist on being believed in, and that doubt is sin. Too well, also, do I know what they themselves most believe in. Verily, not in backworlds and redeeming blood drops, but in the body do they also believe most, and their own body is for them the thing in itself. But it is a sickly thing to them, and gladly would they get out of their skin. Therefore hearken they to the preachers of death, and themselves preach backworlds. 32 Thus spake Zarathustra. Hearken rather, my brethren, to the voice of the healthy body. It is a more upright and pure voice. More uprightly and purely speaketh the healthy body, perfect and square-built, and it speaketh of the meaning of the earth. Thus spake Zarathustra. 4. The despisers of body. To the despisers of the body will I speak my word. One wish them neither to learn afresh, nor teach anew, but only to bid farewell to their own bodies, and thus be dumb. Body am one, and soul so saith the child. And why should one not speak like children? But the awakened one, the knowing one, saith, Body am I entirely, and nothing more, and soul is only the name of some thing in the body. The body is a big sagacity, a plurality with one sense, a war and a peace, a flock and a shepherd. An instrument of thy body is also thy little sagacity, my brother, which thou callest spirit, a little instrument, and plaything of thy big sagacity. Ego, sayest thou, and art proud of that word. For the greater thing in which thou art unwilling to believe is thy body with its big sagacity. It saith not ego, but doth it. What the sense feeleth, what the spirit discerneth, hath never its end in itself. But sense and spirit would fain persuade thee that tine are the end not out. Things, so vain are they. The desponsors of the body 33. Instruments and playthings are sense and spirit, but here them there is still the self. The self seeketh with the eyes of she senses, it bearkeneth also with the ears of the spirit. Ever hearkeneth the self, and seeketh, it compareth, mastereth, conquereth, and destroyeth. It ruleth, and is also the ego s ruler. Behind thy thoughts and feelings, my brother, there is a mighty Lord, an unknown sage it is called self, it dwelleth in thy body, it is thy body. There is more sagacity in thy body than in thy best wise dom. And who then knoweth why thy body requireth just thy best wisdom? Thyself laugheth at thine ego, and its proud prancings. What are these prancings and flights of thought unto me? It saith to itself, a byway to my purpose. I am the leading string of the ego, and the prompter of its notions. The self saith unto the ego, feel pain, and thereupon it suffereth, and thinketh how it may put an end thereto, and for that very purpose it is meant to think. The self saith unto the ego, feel pleasure. Thereupon it rejoiceth, and thinketh how it may ofttimes rejoice, and for that very purpose it is meant to think. To the despisers of the body will I speak a word, that they despise is caused by their esteem. What is it that created esteeming and despising and worth and will? The creating self created for itself esteeming and despising. It created for itself joy and woe. The creating body created for itself spirit, as a hand to its will. Even in your folly and despising ye each serve yourself, ye despisers of the body. I tell you, your very self wanteth to die, and turneth away from life. No longer can your self do that which it desireth most. 34 Thus spake Zarathustra. Create beyond itself. That is what it desireth most, that is all. Its fervor. But it is now too late to do so, so yourself wisheth to. Succumb, ye despisers of the body. To succumb so wisheth yourself, and therefore have ye become despisers of the body. For ye can no longer create beyond yourselves, and therefore are ye now angry with life and with the earth. And unconscious envy is in the sidelong look of your contempt. Ye despisers of the body, ye are no bridges for me to the Superman. Thus spake Zarathustra. My brother, when thou hast a virtue, and it is thine own virtue, thou hast it in common with no one. To be sure, thou wouldst call it by name and caress it, thou wouldst pull its ears and amuse thyself with it. And lo, then hast thou its name in common with the people, and hast become one of the people and the herd with thy virtue. Better for thee to say, ineffable is it and nameless, that which is pain and sweetness to my soul, and also the hunger of my bowels. Let thy virtue be too high for the familiarity of names, and, if thou must speak of it, be not ashamed to stammer about it. Joys and passions 35. Thus speak and stammer. That is my good, that do I love. Thus doth it please me entirely. Thus only do one desire the good. Not as the law of a god do I desire it. Not as a human law or a human need do I desire it. It is not to be a guidepost for me to supports and paradises. An earthly virtue is it which I love. Little prudence is therein, and the least everyday wisdom. But that bird built its nest beside me, therefore I love and cherish it. Now sitteth it beside me on its golden eggs, and quack. Thus shouldst thou stammer, and praise thy virtue. Once hadst thou passions, and calledst them evil. But no \fc haste thou only thy virtues, they grew out of thy passions. Thou implantedst thy highest aim into the heart of those passions, then became they thy virtues and joys. And though thou wert of the race of the hot-tempered, or of the voluptuous, or of the fanatical, or the vindictive, all thy passions in the end became virtues, and all thy devils, angels. Once hadst thou wild dogs in thy cellar, but they changed at last into birds and charming songstresses. Out of thy poisons brewedst thou balsam for thyself. Thy cow, affliction, milkest thou now, drinkest thou the sweet milk of her udder. And nothing evil groweth in thee any longer, unless it be the evil that groweth out of the conflict of thy virtues. My brother, if thou be fortunate, then wilt thou have one virtue and no more. Thus goest thou easier over the bridge. Illustrious is it to have many virtues, but a hard lot, and many a one hath gone into the wilderness and killed himself, because he was weary of being the battle and battlefield all. Virtues. 6. Thus spake Zarathustra. My brother, are war and battle evil. Necessary, however, is the evil. Necessary are the envy, and the distrust, and the backbiting among the virtues. Lo! How each of thy virtues is covetous of the highest place. It wanteth thy whole spirit to be its herald. It wanteth thy whole power, in wrath, hatred, and love. Jealous is every virtue of the others, and a dreadful thing is jealousy. Even virtues may succumb by jealousy. He whom the flame of jealousy encompasseth turneth at last, like the scorpion, the poisoned sting against himself. Ah, my brother, hast thou never seen a virtue backbite and stab itself? Man is something that hath to be surpassed, and therefore shalt thou love thy virtues, for thou wilt succumb by them. Thus spake Zarathustra.